having the protest that I organized and doing all that work was really worth it in the end, to see so much appreciation for people like me and having so much outreach and having people come forward wanting to say something, wanting to have their voices heard, and having that sense of community that I had never felt prior to that event was very cathartic for me.
It made me feel like what I feel and the racism that I experienced, I felt like I wasn't alone and that people cared, and there were other people around me who understood what I was going through and also wanted to stand with me to stand against racism and injustice.
The United Nations of Indigenous people in North America gathered there way before the white man was here.
I believe that there is definitely room for solidarity between Black Lives Matter and Indigenous movements as well. In my protest, we were a Black Lives Matter protest, but we were also Indigenous Lives Matter. And I think that there's room for conversation between those two different movements and making them as one, especially in Canada, where we see so much racism against our Indigenous peoples here.
You can't say Black Lives Matter and fight for equality for your own people without fighting for other people as well. Because what's the point of fighting for equality if we're not all equal at the end of the day?
I think that the message that was sent out to the people of Lethbridge was that we are here, we exist, we have all had horrible things happen to us, we have all experienced racism in our lives, and that we will not let this slide, we will not let it go. It's something that needs to be dealt with, it's something that needs to be talked about, and it's something that Lethbridge needs to change within its foundations to allow people, any person of color really, to be able to live here in the city safely and comfortably, no matter where they're from.
I feel like it showed people in Lethbridge that there is racism that occurs in Canada, although people like to sugarcoat it and they like to say that we're so much better than the US, except we're really not, because just the racism here is different because it's mostly brought through microaggressions, so it's less blatant.
I've seen a bit of a move towards togetherness from a lot of different groups of different cultural people, like different Black people from different cultures, and I've seen a move from Indigenous people as well coming together. That being said, I don't feel as though Lethbridge has made any huge strides as far as personally or governmentally for Lethbridge. I don't think there has been any strides made to rectify what has been happening here. I think it's just more of the Black community making all the effort and making all the work, and the Indigenous community as well. But as far as everyone else, I think everyone's kind of gone back to complacency really quick. The connections that I would see between the Black Lives Matter movement and Black History Month is that, again, the lack of education. So many people that I have interacted with just in my daily life are just so uneducated on what Black Lives Matter means, and that comes from them having a lack of understanding from what we as Black people have survived and the things that we face with prejudice, racism, just systemic racism even. And if we have people being educated on those matters, we probably wouldn't have to have a movement like Black Lives Matter, but because so many people don't understand what's going on, it has to happen. And by having something like Black History Month, we can use that as a platform to have our voices heard.
I feel like at most of the time, history is taught through the perspective of the victor. And I think we need to stop doing that and tell history as it actually happened.
We need to be talking about African history in school. And not just slavery in the United States and in Canada, not just the injustices. Let's go back to African roots. Let's talk about the cultures in Africa. Let's talk about when the colonialism happened and the borders in Africa were totally skewed and tribes that were warring against each other were forced into being in the same country and having to come to some sort of peace that never really happened. Like, let's talk about the roots of where a lot of things culturally come from today. A lot of the things culturally that you see in dance or you see on the media or you see in theater come from Africa. I think the role that museums have with Black Lives Matter and Black History Month is making sure that it's educated properly, making sure that voices of Indigenous people, of Black people, of just people of color are heard, especially during a month like Black History Month. I think that focusing on Black issues and making sure that the community that the museum is within is hearing those stories and getting that information communicated. It's something that needs to be spoken about so that history does not repeat itself.
I hope that when people encounter those things that were donated from the protest in the future, that they can see that we were here and we cared, especially for the Black community. I hope that they can see that when this was happening, there were people who cared and who were fighting for them even then, and that they can see that and be motivated to continue to fight towards equality, because that's what it's all about.